Welcome back. We're going to do a couple slides and then watch a movie clip. So, just so you can prepare and be thinking that way, that's what the second part is going to hold for today, and then we'll be done. We'll pick up the rest of the Vikings when we come back midweek. I want to talk a little bit about how the Viking mystique was built, how they were, how they dressed in terms of the actual fighting that was going to happen, what that looked like. As you look at the Vikings, they're going to be very well armed. You can see the different parts there on the right of their armor. You can see the chest plate, you can see the helmet. You got spears there and shields, swords in their hand, a lot of different weapons that are going to be at their disposal as they go into battle. As you think about these tools, they're going to be so different than what the rest of Europe, especially those that they're fighting against in these ill-prepared monasteries and churches, are going to have. When the Vikings come in, it's basically like the varsity team playing against a Froschoff team. It's going to be complete overwhelming for those that were trying to protect what had been theirs against the Vikings. Probably the most feared warriors that were going to be part of the Viking grouping there were going to be called the Berserkers. Some of you guys have babysat over your lifetime up to this point when kids go nuts, when they're bouncing off the walls, when they're screaming. Maybe you've heard people say they're going berserk. Well, this is where that term comes from. These are Viking warriors that, as they went into battle, only would wear bear skins to protect themselves. They believed, and this is pretty odd, I get that, but they basically had this notion that they had turned into bears, that because of, some historians have said it's a psychedelic tea. Others have said it's basically just drugs. Whatever the thing was, they imagined that on the battlefield they turned into bears and that they were going to be undefeatable. That whatever weapon that would be fashioned against them would not be able to kill them, that they were going to be able to go in and run roughshod against whatever enemy was before them. They would go into battle screaming as if they were bears. You imagine being on the other side and seeing these guys in bear skin. You imagine the head looking at you and these guys screaming at the top of their lungs as they ran across the battlefield. It had to be terrifying. I don't know if you guys talked about this last year, but a little connection, a little similarity might have been within the South as guys would run across the field. Sometimes they were known, especially in the South, to use what they called the rebel yell, just yelling at the top of their lungs as they would go across the field as a way of intimidating their opponent. But for the Berserkers, this was going to be a good tool. As they went into battle, they believed, perhaps similarly, not the same, not saying that, but similarly to those in Islam, that if they died while in battle, that they would be able to go on to an afterlife. We'll be talking about that a little bit more in our next lesson on Wednesday, but they believed that Valhalla was going to await them. There's a number of gods that are within the pantheon of the Viking lore. We're going to be looking at a few of them. Obviously, perhaps even thanks to Disney, you've been aware of one of them, but there's several that you probably could point to, even in your reading, whatever stories you've heard. There's probably been Viking gods that you've been aware of, but we're going to talk about three of them that I'd like you to be aware of. First of all is going to be Odin. Second is going to be Thor. And third is going to be Frey. As you look at these three gods, I'd like you to go ahead and make sure these are in your notes, because as you watch the video clip, along with being aware of what's happening there, I'd like you to make sure that even as the Viking video is playing, that you're able to pause it. There's a clip that is going to be there, and I'd like you to make sure that you pause it as these come up. You can rewind it too, but I'd like you to make sure that these three gods get down and you're clear in your notes. I'll just give you a spoiler alert. This is where we get Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. They come from these three deities, at least according to this movie. So I hope that you guys enjoy the clip. Let's go ahead and get it started. There is a clip at the beginning, or a part of the beginning, the first raid that was going to be from the Vikings on a place called Lindisfarne, and you're going to see you're going to see some pretty top-notch acting. It'd be fun to pause the video and laugh at a couple of these things with you. But without further ado, here is the Viking video. I'd like you to go ahead and make sure that you guys are plugged in as this is playing, and make sure that you guys are not missing any of it. So here we go.
On a calm summer morning in the year 793 AD, the Viking Age is born. It begins with a raid on the Christian monastery at Lindisfarne, on the northeast coast of England. The attack is swift, savage, unexpected. The pagan raiders know full well that monasteries hold great riches, great unprotected riches. The news spreads quickly throughout Europe. A new prayer rises in Christian churches. Lord, protect us from the fury of the men of the north. It is a brutal beginning for a remarkable age of adventure and discovery. Over the next 300 years, warriors, farmers, and explorers from Scandinavia venture out to the limits of the world they know and beyond. In the end, the Vikings reshaped the world. The Vikings fascinate us, but some beliefs are simply not true. The Vikings never feared fog. On the contrary, they could take advantage of it when raiding. Nor did the Vikings ever wear those horned helmets, made familiar to us by Wagner's operas, Hollywood, and comic strips. The men from the north weren't all fearsome seafaring warriors either. During the Middle Ages, most people were farmers. The Vikings were no different. At the time of the raid on Lindisfarne, they were setting out to find new riches, fame, and especially new land. In earlier times, the people living in today's Norway, Sweden, and Denmark were mostly known as traders. In the 8th century, this changed rapidly, thanks to a great technological advantage: Viking ships. Viking ships made the Viking Age. Viking warriors and raiders sailed aboard revolutionary longships whose dragon-shaped prowheads inspired terror. Viking traders, explorers, and settlers used a different kind of ship called the Nar. It was made deeper and wider to carry goods, livestock, and people across the ocean. All Viking ships had hulls made of thin, overlapping planks, nailed together and sealed with tar, producing strong yet light and flexible vessels. They were steered by a side rudder hanging on a steerboard, the origin of the nautical term starboard. The ships were fast and symmetrical and could reverse their course readily. The longships had a shallow draft, meaning they could sail far up rivers and could be beached easily. Shipbuilding required a variety of skills. Large square sails were woven from linen or thin wool, later waterproofed with fat. On longships in particular, oars were used for precise maneuvers and in windless weather. Shipbuilding was an art, and master shipwrights commanded great respect. Their craftsmanship was legendary. So much so that tales of huge longships carrying 200 warriors were long thought to be the exaggerations of storytellers. Then, in 1997, a longship measuring 120 feet and capable of carrying 180 men was unearthed in Roskilde, Denmark. The giant longships had indeed existed. These ships give Vikings a strong superiority at sea, and thousands of them head out in search of wealth, land, and glory. In 2 centuries, the Norse, Danes, and Swedes, or Rus as they are known in the East, are everywhere in Europe. They take over large areas of England and Scotland as well as Ireland, where they found Dublin. In France, the Northmen take over a region of France that becomes known as Normandy. Viking raids reach as far south as the Mediterranean. To the east, the Rus use rivers to reach the Middle East, creating a 1,000-mile trading network and founding their own kingdom, Russia. Success makes the Vikings even more ambitious. Large fleets mount major attacks. The city of Paris must pay an enormous tribute to be spared. Soon after, a great Viking army conquers York and much of eastern England. In the east, the Vikings attack Constantinople, today's Istanbul, with fleets of hundreds of ships. Twice, the great city resists, but the Byzantine emperors are so impressed that they hire Viking warriors as an imperial guard. Europeans saw the Vikings as heathens assaulting Christianity, but it went beyond that. It was a collision between cultures with different traditions and religions. Giants, dwarfs, beasts, and gods fill the crowded Viking pantheon. Warriors who die sword in hand gain a place in Valhalla, a paradise offering an afterlife of fights and feasts. Here, Viking gods are mortal. They can be tricked and lose battles. Still, wisdom reigns supreme among the gods. Odin, chief deity and a god of war, exchanges an eye for knowledge. Thor rules over weather and sends thunder and lightning. Frey gives fertility to nature, men, and their lands. These gods are still present in our daily lives. Odin's day is Wednesday, Thor's day is Thursday, and Frey's day is Friday. south and east of their homelands. Vikings come largely as raiders and warriors. Out west, they become mainly settlers and explorers. They have the North Atlantic to themselves. After settling several small islands, they find a huge land where only a handful of Irish monks has ever set foot. There, the Vikings build a new world. Legend has it that a man suffered an extremely harsh winter on this island, and that he vengefully named it Iceland. Yet, Vikings from Norway and the British Isles came in droves to this unspoiled country, a country sculpted by volcanic forces and immense glaciers. Iceland is a place of otherworldly beauty, an island of mountains, lava plains, sandy beaches, and deep valleys. It is a supernatural land, a land of the gods.
I unashamedly tell you that I left that last little bit on there so that it might spark in you maybe a desire to see Iceland one day. What you're seeing right in front of you right now is what's called a fjord, where you have a deep valley cut. A lot of people have different ideas about how they might have been cut, but then there are steep walls going up on either side. They're spectacular. I hope that you guys get to see not only these in Iceland. I have not been to Iceland yet, but maybe some across Scandinavia as well. Hopefully, again, you've been able to track, and this video was a good way to wrap up today's lesson. Hope that you guys have a real good rest of Monday or Tuesday, depending on when you see this, and I will see you guys midweek. Have a great afternoon. If you have any questions, make sure you let me know. Take care.